Please be advised, this episode does have content that some may find distressing. As always, listener discretion is advised and it is not suitable for anyone under the age of 13.
Hello and welcome to episode 35 of It's Murder Up North. First of all, I just want to say welcome to the show's newest Patreon member, Julia. Thank you for your support and the case suggestion. It is a case I've had a couple of requests for and plan to cover soon. If, like Julia, you wish to support the show, you can do so by signing up to Patreon/It's Murder Up North. I also wish to share my appreciation to those who have written a review on iTunes. Thank you for taking the time to leave such kind words. It really does mean the world to me. My podcast of the week is the wonderful Riddle Me That. I was first drawn in by the host's coverage of the disappearance of the Beaumont children in Australia. Each episode is thoroughly researched and well presented by the host Jules. Here is a sneak peek of her show.
Hi, I'm Jules from Riddle Me That True Crime. I have a passion for all things crime and psychology, and I have a PhD in transpersonal counseling, so I love research and I like to do deep dives into cases. I recently did a 3-part series on the disappearance of Madeleine McCann. I promise you, this is coverage that you haven't heard anywhere else. I also do cases that are lesser known, such as the case of Keith Warren, who in 1986 was found hanging from a tree in Silver Spring, Maryland. His death was classified as a suicide, but things don't add up in the case. Keith was found wearing clothes that weren't his. The 911 caller said that someone had committed suicide in her boyfriend's basement, and when emergency services arrived, the body was in the woods and not in the basement. Keith's mother, Mary, would receive a manila envelope that would call the suicide conclusion by police into question. There were copies of police photos and a note that predicted the death of Keith's friend, Mark Finley. Mark Finley calls Mary to unburden himself, but he would never get the chance. Before he gets a chance to meet up with Mary, he is killed in a freak accident, though some believe it was murder. 2020 is a strange year, and it is comforting to have a favorite podcast to keep you company. I would love to be that podcast. Subscribe to Riddle Me That True Crime on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Google Play, and wherever you get your podcasts.
Now, let's head to the episode. There has been a professional police force in the UK for nearly 200 years. The first official police force was the Metropolitan Police, who were based in London. They were nicknamed Peelers, in reference to their founder, Sir Robert Peel. To become a serving officer, a candidate had to be male between the age of 20 to 27 and had to be 5'7" or taller. Due to the nature of their work, all officers had to be physically fit, be able to read and write, and had no criminal record. A serving officer would be expected to work 7 days a week and would earn £4 a month. They had to abide by certain restrictions. They lost their right to vote and were not allowed to marry without permission. The intention of these rules was to ensure that the force was seen as a moral and uncorruptible institution. By the 1860s, forces had been established all across the UK. However, it still abided by the strict policies established by Robert Peel in 1829. It would be 185 years after the Metropolitan Police were formed, before there would be a major change in the rules regarding who could serve, when in 1914, Edith Smith became the first serving female police constable. With the outbreak of the First World War, women stepped into the positions left vacant by the men who had gone to fight, but these were primarily on a voluntary basis, and these women had no power of arrest. Even after the outbreak of the Second World War, female officers were seen as inferior to male officers, even amongst politicians. For example, the Home Secretary Lord Herbert Morrison stated, quote, "It is true that police duty is, for the most part, a man's job. For such work as driving cars, typewriting and attending the telephone can be done by carefully selected women. There is no reason why canteen duties should not be taken over entirely by women." This was his way of encouraging women to join the police. In 2015, then Home Secretary Theresa May delivered a speech to mark 100 years since Edith Smith was acknowledged as a serving officer. She stated, quote, "Edith Smith, Britain's first ever female police constable with official powers of arrest, began patrolling the wartime streets of Grantham. Back then, policing really was a man's world, and I am sorry to say that my own department was among the first to challenge the recruitment of female police officers." Shortly after Edith Smith's appointment, the Home Office declared that women could not be sworn in as police officers because, and I quote, "they were not deemed proper persons." It was only with the Equal Pay Act in 1970 and the Sex Discrimination Act in 1975 that female police officers were properly integrated with their male counterparts in all shifts and roles. As recently as the 1980s, female officers were issued with uniform and kit, which included a handbag, complete with a smaller truncheon to fit inside it. Women who have overcome obstacles, difficulties and resistance. Women who have triumphed against the odds, winning over their male colleagues and demonstrating their professionalism and bravery. Women doing extraordinary things, but who I expect, if you asked, would say they were only doing their job. And in putting themselves on the line, sadly there have been those female officers who have paid the ultimate price, and to them we owe an enormous debt of gratitude." End quote. In September 2012, Fiona Bourne and Nicola Hughes were two of the female officers who tragically died in the line of duty. 4 months earlier, in May 2012, an altercation in a pub between two rival families would lead to one of the biggest manhunts in UK history, and the deaths of 4 people. It is alleged that Teresa Atkinson, the matriarch from the Atkinson family, threw a bottle at a man called Raymond Young, who had close ties to the Short family. In retaliation, Young hit Mrs. Atkinson with the back of his hand. This minor dispute escalated tensions between the Atkinsons and the Short families. Both were alleged to be involved in extortion and distribution of drugs, and the feud between the rivals had been going on for years. A police source claimed, quote, "We were aware of them, of course. There have been various small-scale tit-for-tat incidents over the years, but they weren't hugely high up on our priority list." This would all change on the evening of the 25th of May 2012. A 60th birthday party was being held at the Cotton Tree pub, which sat at the corner of Ashton New Road and Market Street in Droylsden, a town in the east of Manchester. There were roughly 30 people attending the party, many of them associated with the Short family, including the head of the gang, David Short, and his 23-year-old son, Mark. At 5 to 12, a masked figure burst through the door of the pub. Wielding a firearm, the gunman shot indiscriminately at a group of men who were playing pool. Within minutes, 4 men lay injured, and the attacker fled. David Short exited the pub toilets to find his 23-year-old son, Mark, fatally wounded on the floor. The father was able to cradle his child in the final moments of his life, before he died of his injuries. The other 3 men were taken to hospital with minor injuries, and placed under police guard. It was quickly determined that this was not a random attack. CCTV showed the gunman arriving at the Cotton Tree pub. He exited a Ford Focus from the passenger side and entered the pub, returning quickly to the vehicle, which drove away at speed. The car used as a getaway vehicle was later found burned out on a housing estate 8 miles away in the town of Hattersley. There was no major leads to follow, and as the Shorts were known to be involved in criminal activities, this only added an extra complication to the investigation, as this meant the attacker would have had help covering his tracks. Knowing the family history between the two rival families, police believe that the Atkinsons may have had something to do with the attack, and some speculated that it was due to the altercation in the pub earlier that month. In total, 7 people were arrested in connection with the murder, but none of these were the gunman, whom police suspected was a local man called Cregan. He was known to have associations with the Atkinsons, and had flown to Thailand shortly after the murder. Dale was the son of Paul and Anita Cregan, who lived in the town of Droylsden, where they raised their family. It is alleged that Paul left his wife and 3 children and would later marry a former police officer, who had served in the Greater Manchester Force. His early years were unremarkable. Described as having an angelic appearance, Dale was a shy child whom struggled academically. and was the victim of bullies, some of whom were related to the Short family. The young boy found refuge from the bullies in the hills and fields near his home, where he would go hunting with an air rifle, developing his skills with a firearm. It is claimed he began selling cannabis while at high school, and by the age of 19, Cregan, accompanied by his sister, left his home in the chilly streets of Manchester for the warmth and sunshine of Tenerife, where he acquired a job as a plasterer and roofer. He, however, found a more lucrative source of income. The Spanish island was popular with tourists, and he found a way of making easy money. Trawling the bars, he would find a target, who was ideally an elderly individual on the island for a holiday. Starting a conversation with them, he would proceed to offer to buy them drinks, before introducing them to the idea of buying a timeshare off him. Timeshare or vacation ownership is the joint ownership of one property, usually in a holiday resort where each purchaser is given an allotted time during the year in which they can use the property. But what Cregan was offering was not real, and unfortunately many of the holidaymakers he scammed did not realise until they had returned home. The money he stole from his victims enabled him to live an indulgent lifestyle, allowing him to purchase his collection of primarily military-grade firearms. Returning to Manchester, he began to deal in cocaine, from which he became quite wealthy and developed a reputation as someone to be feared. He also used his money to purchase a luxury car and travel to the West Indies, Thailand and Europe. He particularly enjoyed travelling to Thailand, and here is where he allegedly lost his left eye. According to speculation, on one of his many trips to Thailand, he got caught in a dispute with a gangster who believed Cregan had conned him. Angered, the gangster held Cregan captive, proceeded to torture him and removed his left eye. This fantastical account has never been confirmed by Cregan. He once claimed that he lost his eye during a fight in Thailand, where he was punched in the face with a knuckle duster. However, this has been disputed by doctors who have examined the eye and believe it was removed by a knife. Upon his return to Manchester, the angelic-looking boy was gone, replaced by a man who quickly gained a reputation on the streets of Manchester, with a black onyx eyeball, who was a frightful sight. When David Short learned that Cregan was responsible for his son's death, he threatened to retaliate by going after Dale's girlfriend and 4-year-old child, whom he said he would rape, kill, and burn. Before David could carry out his threats, Cregan was apprehended by police at Manchester Airport when he returned from Thailand on the 12th of June. He was taken into police custody and was questioned regarding the murder of Mark Short. But due to a lack of evidence, he was released on bail pending further investigation. This decision was later criticised. Then Chief Constable of Greater Manchester Police, Sir Peter Fahey, answered this criticism, quote, "It is absolutely normal in the course of a complex crime inquiry that when people are arrested there are occasions where there is insufficient evidence available for them to be charged. In those circumstances, suspects have to be released on bail, as there are strict time limits covering how long suspects can be held in custody without charge. That is exactly what happened in this case." It was this decision which would allow Cregan to claim his next victim, David Short. Learning that David would visit his murdered son's grave every day, Dale planned to attack the grieving father while he was in the cemetery, less than a mile from where his son Mark had been killed. Accompanied by his friend Anthony Wilkinson, the pair lay in wait for Short at the graveyard in Droylsden on the 10th of August 2012. They lingered in the shadows, but as the hours ticked by, they realised that their target wasn't going to show. Not wanting to delay their goal any longer, the two were driven by a third man, Jermaine Ward, to David Short's home address, where they waited in a van they had hired. Unaware of the danger, David Short walked out of his front door and headed to the back of his car. As he opened the boot, Cregan saw his opportunity. Jumping out of the van, he ran across the road and opened fire. Whether he had heard the footsteps or the gunshots, David instinctively fled towards his house, with Cregan in pursuit, continuing to fire as they entered the property. David raced into the garden as the barrage of bullets continued. Wounded, he stumbled to the floor. Cregan would later advise a psychiatrist of what happened next, quote, "I shot David Short point blank in the head 3 times, but I would have preferred it if I would have used a knife. I felt calm before killing David Short, but after, a big relief rushed through my body. If I'd had time, I would have cut his head off and arms and legs. I would have gone and got a knife from the kitchen and used that. The thoughts were such. I knew I would have to do it. However, after I killed Mark Short, he said he would rape my son. He said he would set him on fire. He threatened my whole family. He told me the gloves are off, so I was always going to kill him." End quote. Not only did he shoot David Short, but Cregan then threw a hand grenade at the dying man before fleeing. He would go on to claim that his only regret when killing David's son was that he had not been able to acquire a hand grenade that day. Following the attack, Cregan returned to the vehicle, and they drove to a nearby address where Cregan and Wilkinson approached the house of Sharon Hawk, a relative of Short's. Cregan threw a grenade at the front door and fled, but they were captured on CCTV. The men then fled to a rendezvous point where they met Mohammed Ali. They dumped the van and attempted to destroy it with a grenade, but failed. They were then driven by Ali to a safe house in West Yorkshire. Police quickly connected the murder of David Short to the grenade attack on Sharon Hawk's home, and because of this, they were able to obtain the CCTV footage which clearly showed Cregan and Wilkinson at the scene. Given that Cregan had now murdered 2 people in such a brutal fashion, via the use of military-grade weapons, he became amongst the UK's most wanted. Considered armed and dangerous, the police wanted to apprehend him quickly, and so a multidisciplinary task force was set up, which involved the joint cooperation of the police and army to track down the suspect through an operation codenamed Qatar. Cregan's face soon appeared on billboards and big screen TVs all over the country, with an offer of £25,000 as a reward to anyone who turned him in. However, they realised that Cregan invoked so much terror in the community that people were not willing to risk their lives for such a small amount, so the reward was increased to £50,000 in hopes that this would encourage people to come forward. But the police were met with a wall of silence. Nobody wanted to turn Cregan in, either because they feared him or supported him. One person from Droylsden stated, quote, "It's not hard to work out why. The Shorts being taken out was the best thing to happen in Droylsden for years. Bullies they were. Bullies and thugs. Cregan was a hero round here." End quote. It was alleged that Cregan spent time in Leeds, Kent and Wales whilst hiding from the police, but was able to return to Droylsden on numerous occasions. Despite the manhunt for him, many people offered him protection, claiming they believed that David would have hurt Cregan's 4-year-old son. But how did Cregan manage to get in and out of Manchester undetected while the police were actively searching for him? It would later come to light that he had help from the girlfriend of one of his associates. She worked as a 999 call handler, and in order to help Cregan, she accessed areas of the police computer system that were off limits, from which she was able to track officers' movements and receive updates on Operation Qatar, thus allowing her to tip off Cregan. On the 23rd of August, Jermaine Ward appeared at a police station in Huddersfield. He claimed he had been forced to drive the hire van for Cregan and Wilkinson on the day of David Short's murder. He further alleged that the pair kept him hostage in a flat for 2 weeks and told him if he tried to escape, they would kill his family. During police questioning, Jermaine Ward was interviewed by Detective Constable Chris Barnes. He told the officer that he had become acquainted with Cregan over a year earlier when they met at a party. Regarding what happened while he was with Cregan and Wilkinson, he told police that he had observed the pair watching news reports about the Shorts' murders, and that they were both laughing when the deceased were referred to as lions. He claimed that Cregan said, quote, "He didn't look like a lion to me, did he?" And they both started laughing. Dale and Anthony were laughing to each other. They were laughing about it as if it was a joke. Continuing questioning, DC Barnes, referring to Cregan, said, quote, "It's no exaggeration that he's known in Clayton, Droylsden, as a bit of a hard man." Ward replied, "I've never known him do anything like that. He never seemed like a hard man to me, or a gangster." DC Barnes continued the questioning, quote, You live on the streets of North Manchester, got a criminal record, about to go to court for drugs. What did you think they were going to do with 2 guns in broad daylight? I don't know, Ward replied. DC Barnes then insinuated that Ward was not being 100% truthful. You know what I think? I think he trusts you. I think you were a willing accomplice in all of this. I think you have driven this van quite willingly, probably for payment. Getaway drivers for villains are a big commodity. They are the most trusted people. You can give any muppet a gun. You need someone who you are putting your life in their hands to be a getaway driver. Dale Cregan has been a villain all his life, but he doesn't get caught because people don't want to give evidence against him, and he's not stupid. Covers his tracks, right? What I think you are doing is minimising your role in all of this. At this point, the detainee began to cry and rebuff the officer's theory, telling him, quote, "You don't know what it feels like to have a grenade in your mouth, or have a gun put to your head. Whatever I can tell you about them, I have told you." When the case came to trial, Ward would be found guilty of assisting an offender. Tensions were heightened in Manchester. Armed police were seen at train and bus stations, and an increased presence was seen across the city, with raids on houses that were believed to be associated with Cregan, but they were no closer to catching him. They were able to apprehend Cregan's friend Anthony Wilkinson, the man who had assisted him in the attack on David Short and partook in the attack on Sharon Hawke's home. It was the 2nd of September when Wilkinson was arrested in a park in East Manchester, but he stayed loyal to Cregan and refused to talk about his friend's whereabouts. On the 17th of September, in the village of Mottram on the outskirts of Manchester, a man opened his door to be greeted by Dale Cregan, his black onyx eye looking upon him like a dark abyss. The man recognised his visitor because he worked as a barber and on occasion he had cut Cregan's hair, but to see the man police had been searching for stood on his doorstep filled him with dread. His fear was amplified when Cregan placed a hand grenade on the mantelpiece. Cregan then ordered the barber to do his hair and shave his beard. Hoping that after he had fulfilled the request, Cregan would leave, the barber set to work, but when he finished, Cregan stayed. He remained at the man's terraced house, which sat at the end of the cul-de-sac with a clear view of the road. The 18th of September started like any other day at the police station in Hyde, a town 7 miles east of Manchester city centre, which has a notorious past. It was where Myra Hindley and Ian Brady lived, and where Dr. Harold Shipman had his practice. Fiona Bourne and Nicola Hughes attended the morning briefing before heading out on their first assignment of the day, escorting a prison transport. They then began their patrols around the towns of Hyde and its surrounding areas. At the dispatch centre, an emergency call was received. Reports of a concrete slab being thrown through a kitchen window in the village of Mottram.
Police emergency.
Someone just threw a big concrete slab through my back window and ran off.
Of the house or a car? What are we talking?
No, sorry, in my back window in the house.
In the house. What's the address there, please?
30 Abbey Gardens, Mottram.
Did you see them?
Seen one, yeah.
Do you know them?
No, I don't know.
Okay. Do you know why they've done it?
I haven't got a clue.
Is it a rear window, did you say?
Yeah, it's in the back garden.
Were you in the room where it came through, or did you hear the bang?
No, I was upstairs. I looked out the window and seen one boy running off.
Is it a kitchen window that's gone through?
Yeah, kitchen.
So it's just happened prior to your ringing, has it, yeah?
Yeah.
And it's a piece of concrete, yeah?
Yeah, it's a piece of concrete out the corner of a paving stone.
So it's a piece of concrete paving stone, yeah?
Yeah.
So it's all one person running off, yeah?
Yeah.
Which way they ran? What direction?
Ran there's like a field at the back, and I've seen them running over the field. I can point it out to the officer.
Which fields? What road is the field on? Is it off Abbey Gardens or?
Kind of, yeah, but you...
Not on the other side of Ashworth Lane?
Yeah.
So they've gone toward Broadbottom Road across the field?
No, not that. Yeah, kind of, yeah. It's weird where it is, because there's like all the gardens and then a bit of a field that you can see out the window, and that's where it's seen.
Is it in the general direction of Mottram Church, or the other way?
Yeah, the other way.
The other way. So they've gone onto the estate, further towards John Kennedy Way?
Yeah, that's it, yeah.
Okay. Was he white male?
He had an adult mate, so I couldn't really tell you, but...
He was a male, though, yeah?
Yeah, he was a male.
You know how old he was?
No, but he was about my size, about 5'9".
The slim,
Medium build.
Medium.
Medium.
And what was he wearing then?
Black coat with a hood up, grey tracksuit bottoms.
You didn't recognise him, no?
No.
And you have no idea why it might have happened?
Off the top of my head, no. I'm trying to rip my brains now, see if it pissed anyone off, but I don't think so, no. No.
Your name, please?
Adam.
What's your second name, Adam?
Gartrey.
Sorry, spell that for me.
G-A-R.
Yeah.
E-R-E.
Sorry, give me that again. G-R.
G-A-R.
Yeah.
E-R-E.
E-R-E.
No, T-R-E.
Right.
Gartrey.
Gartrey, sorry. That's what I didn't know.
Okay.
And you live at 30, do you, Adam?
Yeah.
Okay. And you think it's an act of damage as opposed to somebody trying to break into the house, do you?
Possibly, yeah. That's what I'm thinking, because if you look through that window, I'm decorating at the minute, so there's no curtains up. If you look through that window, you can see my plasma, so I'm wondering if they've...
So you're thinking,
where
they broke the window, is it near a handle or anything to open another window?
Quite a big window, actually, so they would have had no problem getting through.
Climbing through, okay. Right, I'll get an officer up there, have a look around and see if they can see anybody similar, and then they'll come and see you. All right, Adam?
How long would it take? Do you know roughly? I know that it's not that serious.
Well, because it's just happened, it's gone in on the priority, so that's within the hour, certainly. But they'll try and get up there as soon as, if there's a possibility he's still knocking about.
All right, then. Thanks very much.
Okay.
I'll wait. I'll be waiting.
The police radio crackled to life in the police van Nicola was driving, requesting they attended the incident. Reaching the turning for Abbey Gardens, they drove down into the cul-de-sac. It was a straight road which gently sloped downhill towards a row of terraced properties, behind which rose the hills of the Peak District. Pulling up in an empty bay in front of the terraces, the officers jumped from their vehicle, straightened their uniforms and approached number 30 Abbey Gardens. The house had a waist-height wooden fence. A living room window sat to the left of the door, which had a clear view of the road into the cul-de-sac. In front of the window was a small garden. Passing by the window, the two officers entered through the gate, which closed behind them. The door was set back with a bin store to the left, and the neighbour's fence to the right. Nicola stepped under the porch and knocked upon the door. Just as he said on the 999 call, the man had been waiting. He opened the door, a fully automatic 9mm Glock, ready to fire. He shot at the officers, striking both of them in the chest. Fortunately, their body armour protected them from harm. Fiona was able to move to the wall of the bin store, where she was shielded from the gunfire. Nicola had turned to get to shelter, but her proximity to the front door made her an easy target. The gunman shot at the bottom of her armoured vest, the bullet penetrating her back and striking her spine, paralysing her. Nicola fell forwards onto the garden path, where she lay helplessly as she was shot 3 more times. Fiona had found herself cornered by the living room window, and the gunman showed her no mercy, firing at her 24 times. Not all the bullets struck the officer, some embedded themselves into the render of the house. Despite being shot, Fiona withdrew her taser and managed to fire, but her shot hit the garden path as she fell to the ground. As the officers lay wounded, the callous attacker returned to Nicola and emptied the remaining bullets into her torso. Now out of bullets, he threw his gun to the ground and withdrew a hand grenade, which he released into the garden before fleeing. The man in a light grey sweatshirt and blue knee-length shorts ran to a BMW nearby and raced off up the street as people emerged from their homes to investigate the blast. Just over 7 minutes later, the BMW pulled up outside Hyde Police Station, where the man calmly exited his car and walked inside. Approaching the desk, he allegedly said, quote, "I dropped the gun at the scene, and I've murdered 2 police officers. You were hounding my family, so I took it out on yours." Realising he was face to face with Manchester's most wanted, the officer didn't hesitate, leaping over the desk and swiftly apprehending the man, who, unbeknown to the officer, had just gunned down 2 of his colleagues. The news quickly spread through the police stations of Manchester, and officers who had been on high alert for 40 days were now able to relax. As Dale Cregan was taken into custody, the relief soon dissipated, as call handlers began to receive emergency calls from Abbey Gardens in Mottram. The dispatcher who had assigned Fiona and Nicola to the reports of vandalism at a home on Abbey Gardens frantically attempted to contact the 2 officers, repeating their call sign, Golf Mike 41, but to no avail. Arriving at the scene, the first officers were confronted with the horrific sight of their two injured colleagues. A man from a neighbouring house was knelt beside Nicola, offering her comfort. Partner Fiona Bourne lay motionless beneath the window from which Cregan had watched their approach. There was no comfort to offer her, as the officer had already passed away. Fiona Bourne was 32 years old and had been with the force for 7 years. Born in the city of Norwich to June and Paul, as the daughter of a Royal Air Force engineer, the baby was soon introduced to military life. When her father was transferred to RAF Kinloss in Scotland, where Fiona spent her early years, before the family moved again to spend 3 years in Bruggen in Germany. By her teens, Fiona was back in Scotland with her family, where she completed high school in Lossiemouth. In 1997, the family then relocated to the Isle of Man, where Fiona studied A-levels in English, Computer Studies and General Studies. Her friend Brian James Boyle recalls her fondly, quote, "Very lovable, friendly person, who never had a bad word to say about anyone." One of Fiona's strengths was her ability to make friends easily, and no matter where her family lived, she would quickly form a loyal circle of friends. When she started at the University of Central Lancashire, she quickly settled and worked hard on her course in Media and Film Studies. However, upon graduating in 2002, she found herself unable to settle in a job. She was a free-spirited and adventurous individual who couldn't be tied down to a 9-to-5 routine. Her experiences travelling the world with her family made her seek out something that would be both challenging and rewarding, and she settled on joining the police force, which she did in 2007. Reflecting on his daughter's career choice, Paul Bourne stated, quote, "She liked doing odd things rather than routine. She hated routine. I had tried to persuade her to be a pilot, but she worked out, from what I was doing as an engineer, that pilots' lives were very routine and they never did anything out of the ordinary. She wanted something different to that, and police life is very different. You never know what's going to come around the corner. It was the perfect career choice for her. She really enjoyed it. One of the job choices she was considering was joining the Air Force, and at the time the Air Force were camped out in Afghanistan. My thoughts were that the police was probably safer than Afghanistan or Iraq, and you'd have less to worry about, but in retrospect, that wasn't really true. We just didn't appreciate, and most people don't, how dangerous police work can be." Her father continued, quote, "Her fellow officers said they loved being partnered with her because she was calm, collected and professional, and could diffuse situations with her calm, gentle way. She was an excellent bobby, and cared about her job and the communities that she served." Recalling when she joined the force, the Chief Constable of Greater Manchester Police, Sir Peter Fahey, said, quote, "When she first joined the shift, she was quiet and reserved. However, she came out of her shell and had a great sense of humour, and always enjoyed a good laugh." Fiona had spent the summer of 2012 with her sister Vicky, who had recently moved from Ipswich to Leeds. Vicky commented, quote, "We really crammed in the memories over those 6 weeks. I had just moved house and Fiona was planning her wedding. At the time it felt like we'd both got our lives sorted out. Then it all fell apart." Fiona spent carefree days with her sister and bonding with her future stepdaughter Jessie. The 32-year-old was excited to be planning her wedding to her partner Claire, and loved having her sister close to share the experience with. She had already picked out her wedding photographer, her best friend, Shan Fisher, who lived in the Isle of Man, and was planning on selecting her dress. But on the morning of the 18th of September, as Fiona arrived at work, her mind was just filled with design ideas for the wedding invites, and she'd been asking her colleagues for their opinions. Attending the morning briefing, Fiona was paired up with 23-year-old Nicola Hughes. A cheerful and chatty young lady, they had requested to work together that day, as they were in charge of arranging the Christmas party and wished to work out the plans. Nicola had been with the force for 3 years. She was born and raised in Greater Manchester, and was currently living at home with her mum Susan. When Nicola was born on the 15th of October 1988, she weighed just 6 pounds 2 ounces. But for her overjoyed parents, Susan and Bryn, their joy turned to fear when their baby experienced difficulties early on, suffering 2 cardiac arrests, but she proved to be a fighter. In her father's book, An Extraordinary Sacrifice, the story of PC Nicola Hughes, he wrote about his daughter, recalling that when she was just a few hours old, she had her photo taken, and Bryn remembers how, quote, she was looking cross and moody, as if she was thinking, "What do you think you're playing at? Dressing me up like this?" It was in that moment, he thought, what strong-minded little things she seemed, and she proved him right. As the years passed, Nicola grew into an intelligent, fun-loving and adventurous girl, who had inherited her dad's sense of humour and stubbornness, and her mother's organised and thorough nature. Throughout her early years, Nicola proved she was academically gifted, and had a large group of friends. By the age of 15, the hard-working girl had started her first job waiting tables at a restaurant. Nicola's parents split when she was in her late teens, but she maintained a strong relationship with both her mum and dad, and her sunny demeanour did not dull. She started college to study psychology and law, with the intention of becoming a pathologist, but she soon came to the realisation that this career path was not for her, mainly due to the fact she could not handle the sight of blood. Nicola went on to study social sciences and psychology at Huddersfield University. However, at 19, before completing her degree, she made the decision to apply for the police training programme, with a desire to one day become a firearms officer. Leaving university, Nicola began her career with Greater Manchester Police. The young officer proved herself to be a determined and dedicated person who wouldn't give up. She learned from her mistakes and failings and strove to overcome them. Nicola demonstrated she wasn't afraid to step into trouble. Whether it was a fight at a pub or an aggressive driver, she stood her ground. Nicola was also ambitious, with a desire to advance through the ranks, and was planning to take a sergeant's exam, so she would be ready when the perfect position arose, but she would never get a chance to achieve her goals. Nicola was a compassionate individual, described as someone who lit up the room with her warmth and kindness. One day while on duty, Nicola attended the death of an elderly lady, and when she finished work, she stopped by the house of the deceased family to comfort them. She enjoyed socialising and was a real chatterbox, who was fun-loving and great company. But Nicola was a true homebody. She was very close to her family, living at home with her mum Susan, being a protective big sister to her brother Sam, and play-fighting with her dad, even in her 20s. Nicola was busy enjoying her career and life, and her dad Bryn stated she was in no rush to settle down and have children, recalling her saying, quote, "They ruin your life, ruin your finances, and ruin your body." Tragically, she would never get a chance to change her mind. Nicola was rushed to Tameside Hospital, where she was pronounced dead shortly after her arrival. When Cregan handed himself in, he apparently said, quote, "Sorry about those two that have been killed. I wish it was men." Following his arrest, Cregan was assessed by psychologist Dr. James Collins, who said Cregan explained that his motivations for killing David Short was because he wanted to protect his family, stating, quote, "I couldn't get him out of my head. It was on my mind constantly. I could not put the thoughts away. I thought if I kill him, maybe I will get a res. When I was having my fantasies, I used to think about stabbing him repeatedly, smashing his head with a hammer and cutting his head off. The thoughts were such, I knew I would have to do it. However, after I killed Mark Short, he said he would rape my son. He said he would set him on fire. He threatened my whole family. He told me the gloves were off. So I was always going to kill him. It was not an urge. It was because of what it was doing to me if I didn't do it. I was also worried about my mother and my brother. Since I lost my eye, it's been worse. I thought if I killed David Short, I thought all these thoughts would go away. I did feel better after killing him. I felt better for a couple of days, but all the thoughts came back. The paranoia was so bad I used to just sit in the house on my own. David Short was the biggest threat. I felt quite good about myself when I killed him." The trial began on the 4th of February 2013, held at Preston Crown Court. It would last 77 days. Cregan and 9 co-defendants were transported from Strangeways Prison in Manchester, where they were being held in custody, to the court, which was a huge logistical operation. Numerous armed response vehicles, prison transport vans and escort vehicles, including the force's helicopter, were involved. Upon arriving at the court, press congregated waiting for their news headline, and on the rooftops and inside the building firearms officers were positioned, while in the courtroom Cregan was flanked by up to 18 officers at a time. Although Cregan had initially admitted to the murder of PC Fiona Bourne and Nicola Hughes, he entered a plea of not guilty to 4 charges of murder and a charge of attempted murder, meaning that the families of the deceased had to endure a long and heart-wrenching trial, where details of their loved ones' deaths would be revealed. The details of the feud between the Shorts and Atkinson families was divulged to the jury, who were told that it had apparently started in 2001, when Leon Atkinson assaulted David Short for looking at him the wrong way. It escalated through physical altercations between different family members, and then in 2003, Atkinson's father was in the pub when he was shot in the kneecap. This only fueled tensions further. In another incident, David Short was knocked off his bike and had his throat slit. Many alleged that Cregan was responsible for this, but there was no evidence to support that speculation. Although Cregan did confess to the psychologist he had been thinking about killing David Short for roughly 5 years. He claimed his dispute with the Shorts first started when they bullied him as a teenager, and alleged that he refused to be shown as weak, so he began to develop a, quote, bad fetish for knives. During searches of properties known to be frequented by Cregan, 10 firearms were recovered, including machine guns. He claimed he just liked collecting them, and had not purchased them to protect himself. Michelle Kelly had to deliver testimony detailing her son Mark Short's final moments, where the 23-year-old was killed at the Cotton Tree pub. Kelly addressed the court, quote, I was sat at the end of the bar, and Mark was playing pool. He had his back to me. Suddenly I heard a bang, and then another one. Then it was bang, bang, bang. Mark was at the far side of the pool table. I saw the gunman aim and shoot at him just before he left. Mark tried to grab him. I grabbed a pool cue and ran out to try to catch whoever I could find. As I came round the corner, I could see a blue car driving away. She then fought back her tears as she talked about how she returned to find her son being cradled in his father's arms where he passed away. Just 10 weeks later, Michelle would lose her partner, David Short. The trial was long and complex, with many intricate relationships to disclose. These included the call handler who had passed on information about police movements during the hunt for Cregan, a woman who owned a laundrette who had helped arrange a safe house for Cregan by putting him in touch with Muhammad Ali, who took Cregan, Atkinson and Ward to a property in West Yorkshire, following the murder of David Short. Nicholas Clark QC, for the prosecution, described how Cregan murdered PC Fiona Bourne and PC Nicola Hughes, 2 officers just doing their jobs, serving their community. The prosecutor explained how Cregan had opted for the property with a clear view of the road that led into the cul-de-sac. Using a false name, he placed a call to 999 and advised the operator he would be waiting. He continued, quote, Cregan's carefully laid plan had been successful. He had lured 2 unarmed officers to his door and was armed, ready and waiting for them. As Nicola and Fiona walked through the small front garden, he opened the front door and immediately fired his Glock. Such was the speed of the attack upon the 2 officers that only a matter of 31 seconds had elapsed between Nicola Hughes switching off the engine of the vehicle and Fiona Bourne firing the taser. Fiona was shot between 5 and 8 times, receiving a total of 8 gunshot-related injuries. She was killed by a perforating shot to the upper side of her chest. Clark explained how Cregan then returned to Nicola. Unable to move or defend herself, he shot her another 6 times in the back and head. Having emptied all 32 bullets in his gun, he threw a grenade at the officers. After almost 20 weeks of hearing harrowing testimony regarding the murders of Mark Short, his father David Short, PC Fiona Bourne and PC Nicola Hughes, there was a shocking development. In the final days of the trial, Cregan changed his pleas to guilty, but maintained he was not guilty of the attempted murder of Sharon Hark, whose house he had targeted with a hand grenade after killing David Short. When the verdicts were delivered for Cregan's co-defendants, they were as follows. Leon Atkinson, Ryan Hadfield and Matthew James were found not guilty for the murder of Mark Short, and not guilty of the attempted murders of the 3 other men who were injured in the shooting at the Cotton Tree pub. As his associates were cleared of their charges and led from the dock, Cregan shook hands with each of them and smiled. The next verdict was delivered for Francis Dixon. He was found not guilty of the murder of David Short, and not guilty of the attempted murder of Sharon Hark. He cheered as he was led away. Unbeknownst to the jury, Francis Dixon had been serving a life sentence for conspiracy to commit robbery. In 1999, he had been part of a group who had shot 5 bystanders as they fled from the police during a high-speed chase. Having been released early, he was on recall to prison after being charged with murder. Anthony Wilkinson, who waited with Cregan in the cemetery and later went to David Short's house, had pleaded guilty to the murder of David Short. After he joined Cregan in pursuing the grieving father through his house and admitted to shooting at him, with regards to the attempted murder of Sharon Hark, the charges were dropped. He was given a life sentence with a minimum term of 35 years. Addressing Cregan and his murder of Fiona Bourne and Nicola Hughes, Mr. Justice Holroyd stated, "There was substantial premeditation and planning. You lured 2 female officers to their death. By making a false report, you have been the victim of a crime. I have no doubt you were expecting 1 or more unarmed officers to attend, and that is exactly what happened. You had armed yourself with at least 1 hand grenade, and with a self-loading pistol, to which you had fitted an extended magazine containing 32 rounds. PC Fiona Bourne and PC Nicola Hughes were sent in response to your call for help, performing their public duty for the public's good. You were able to see them coming. You must have seen they were unarmed female police officers. You opened the front door, and with the advantage of surprise you opened fire before your victims had a chance to do anything to protect themselves. Although the officers survived the first shots which hit them, you pursued them with a cold-blooded and ruthless determination to end their lives. One of your shots hit PC Hughes in the back, with the result she was lay on the ground, paralysed. As you left her there, you pursued PC Bourne, firing some 20 shots at her. You then returned to PC Hughes. You acted with a premeditated savagery. Delivering his sentence, the judge instructed Cregan to stand and stated, quote, "The court is driven to the conclusion that there must be a whole life order. That means, in plain terms, that you will never be released from prison." No verdict could undo the damage Cregan had done, devastating 3 families by claiming the lives of their loved ones. He stole a husband and a son from Michelle Kelly. The deaths of the father and son shook the close community of Droylsden. To have 2 people murdered in such a brutal manner lingers with the town to this day. The outpouring of grief and support for the 2 police officers, PC Fiona Bourne and PC Nicola Hughes, came in from all over the country. 2 young women doing the job they loved, with a desire to protect and serve their communities, had their futures stolen. The officers' funerals were held at Manchester Cathedral. The immense space was filled by mourners, and thousands more lined the streets to pay their respects to the fallen officers. One of the most poignant moments was the sight of 5-year-old Jessie, Fiona's soon-to-be stepdaughter, standing in a floral dress with a pink bow around her waist, holding a bouquet of flowers, looking like the bridesmaid she would not have the chance to be. The ripple effect of their murders affected many, from their senior officer at Hyde Police Station, who felt he had failed to protect his officers and considered stepping down from his position, to their colleagues, who were the first on the scene and saw Fiona and Nicola in their final moments. The 2 officers were unable to return to work, with one of them breaking down just at the thought of putting his uniform back on. And tragically, one of them could not cope with the horror of what he saw that day, and took his own life. The PC Nicola Hughes Memorial Fund was established by her dad, Bryn. The charity aims to help young people who have lost loved ones through violent crime. Bryn is an amazing man. He has done multiple fundraising events, including a marathon in the North Pole. In honour of Fiona Bourne, an apartment complex was constructed in the Manchester suburb of Sale, which was named Fiona Gardens, and was specifically designed to help those who were elderly and vulnerable. Fiona's sister Vicky stated, quote, "Fiona was most passionate about working with the elderly and young people. It was the human side of policing that she really enjoyed. It was the vulnerable that Fiona was there to protect, and to have this named after her is an honour and a privilege. She would have absolutely loved it." I don't know what to say about this case. Manchester has a dear place in my heart, and I know when this happened, it didn't just shock the city, it shocked the whole country. They were just doing their job and they lost their lives. But they also chose to walk in the footsteps of Edith Smith and the thousands of other female officers in the last 200 years. So thank you for joining me for episode 35 of It's Murder Up North. Episode 36 will be available next week. So in the meantime, keep an eye on those shadows.